Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. It's Fahim, and welcome back to Making Sense of Modern Times. For those of you who are new to this space, this is a place I created to have elevated conversations about the modern human experience. I think that it's such an interesting time to be a human being. We have unlimited information, but we have shrinking attention spans and all these wonderful contradictions that make up being a person today. And I love having these conversations, and I love having them with people who have an interesting take on them, who are doing something with their life that has something to do with it. And that's what the space is for me to get to share those conversations with all of you. So hopefully it adds some value and it's fun to listen to. So today I'm very excited to be able to welcome Mr. Alex Weber to my platform. He's someone I've been trying to lure into having a conversation with me here for a while. And the reason for that is we'll get a little bit onto how Alex and I met, but Alex is an experienced operator in the world of technology and business. He's an entrepreneur. And as is true to his nature, he's also a mentor to other people whilst being an enthusiast for technology. And I think that's such an amazing mix of things to enter into a modern times conversation, because you have in there business, technology, mentorship. How do these things all work together? Why do they matter? So we're going to dive into those things today. What I love about Alex is he's really passionate about entrepreneurship and its ability to change the world. And that's why he's dedicating his kind of self to it. So, I mean, Alex has gone on the journey with N26, German fintech, all the way from one of the first employees to, one of 2,000 employees, and he was the chief growth officer. And then after taking some time off, traveling, which we'll talk about, he's currently got a few plans, which maybe if we're lucky, he'll share with us a little bit later. So welcome to Alex. Good to see you, my friend. And thank you for taking the time to have this conversation.
Super excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Fahim. Thank you.
Amazing. So let's dive into it. I think maybe we should start talking about, just quickly, give us a view of who you are. What's been your kind of life's journey to date? Give us a little bit about the big pieces, and we'll go from there.
Wow, a big question to start. Let's do it. So let's start with some headlines there. Born and raised in Austria, just outside of Vienna. The first, I think, very decisive chapter of my life was in competitive sport. So for 10 years, I was a competitive swimmer in Austria, sort of besides high school. So from the ages of 8 till 18, that was very much a central part of my life and taught me a lot, about things you might not expect to learn in swimming, such as leadership, team, but also for me personally, what does it mean to constantly try to improve oneself? What does it mean to participate in big competitions, also mentally to be ready at those days? It is much more of a mental than a physical effort, I think. To stay cool under pressure when you're in the finals of the nationals or something like that, to deliver. So that's also with regard to discipline, building value over time. For me also, I think very much towards the end of my 10-year journey was also the peak. So I was not someone who just naturally peaked early, let's say, with that, but really had to put in the effort over many years for every day. But that's I think is something that fundamentally shaped me, and I'm very grateful for that time. I then sort of at age 18 had this big sort of crossroads in the journey. Do you then decide to, after competing at national level, do you then make this your career? Do you become a professional athlete also for the next 10 years? Or do you pursue more of an, let's say, academic career? Or do you want to go study, and do you want to start building a career in business? And for me, actually, at the point in time, it was a fairly straightforward and easy decision, because I knew in the very long term, I want to be an entrepreneur in the very long term. I want to build a career in business and sort of go broader than sports. At the same time, sports always being a central part of my life and my identity until today. So that was sort of maybe the first journey that then led me to go and study business. That led me to do an exchange in Sydney, which also fundamentally changed my life's trajectory, because I discovered entrepreneurship there, actually. Yeah. So when I said before I wanted to be an entrepreneur, that was something I figured out during my studies. I figured it out in Sydney in 2013. And that was the point in time where I knew this is going to be my long-term profession. It is a profound opportunity to have positive impact at scale. It's a profound opportunity to surround yourself with like-minded, future-oriented, optimistic people who have a growth mindset, who really want to change the world for the better. And that was something I deeply gravitated to, which then led me to joining an early-stage startup in Berlin. I had the feeling after finishing my studies, I could either start a startup right away, or I could join something very early stage and take some important learnings away. Because one misconception I find in entrepreneurship is that either you start a startup out of university, or you're just not an entrepreneur. And I think I fundamentally disagree with that. I think in the business world, being a founder is one of the hardest careers you can choose. And therefore, why, if you have a 50-year career, let's say, why do you on day one need to start at the peak? If you want to start mountaineering, you don't on day one climb Everest. You go and get into the profession. So for me, I thought I want to dedicate the first 10 years of my 50-year entrepreneurial profession to growing skills, being part of a fast-paced environment, and was very fortunate to discover, to get to meet the founders of N26 when they were in very early days. It was even still a company called Papaya, which was the previous company before pivoting to N26, and joined them there as employee number 7, as you said in the introduction. Then over the next 9 years, we went to almost 2,000 employees. I became the chief growth officer 5 years into the journey, did that for 4 years. And then left mid of 2023 to then pursue my long-term dream to actually start my own company. Knew I also wanted to take some relevant time off to deeply think about, what is that purpose of my venture that I will start as a founder. And so when traveling for a year, as part of that, close to a year, as part of that, met you, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
Super special. And I have returned from that, and I'm now laying all the right foundations to venture into starting my own company. So those are some headlines, and
I love it.
Very happy to take it deeper. Anything you want.
I mean, for those listening, I think there's so much wisdom that Alex has shared just in his introduction alone. I think, firstly, the amount of discipline and how intentional he is at every step of his journey is something that's always left its mark on me. So not just being satisfied with being a professional athlete, knowing that he wants to make a change in the world, then going on to taking steps to make that change, and then even deciding after 9 years of high growth. This for me is fascinating. 9 years of high growth, you're still not even 30 years old. You are at you're a chief growth officer of a global company, and you decide, I think I'm ready for the next step. Now, to you, that seems like a natural step, but to many people who are on a rocket, the company hasn't IPO'd yet. There's all sorts of things that could come from that, financial security and all the wonderful things. Conventional wisdom tells us to sit where you are and keep doing the thing. What made Alex go, this time is done, it's time for the next journey? What was that decision? How did you know that?
Yeah. Well, great question. It's it definitely wasn't an easy decision. I think over time, it felt right. I felt ready. I mean, I think you never feel fully ready, probably. I think this is a very important lesson. Even now, when I'm close to getting started and had also 18 more months to deeply think about what I'm doing, you never feel entirely ready to be an entrepreneur, to start a startup. But I felt after 4 years in the role as chief growth officer, also having built a very senior and great team at N26, having served there from pre-launch to where we were in a very, very solid position, it felt like the company was in a good place. It felt the team was in a good place. It felt from a learning perspective, I had deeply understood what there was to learn as chief growth officer for 4 years. And yeah, I mean, you need to get the domino rolling at some point. Also knowing that I wanted to take some time off, knowing that I wanted to. I mean, you alluded also to my age, so I was, and very much in my mind, I was in my 20s. I'm building with N26. In the 30s, I'm building my own. So around about the time I was also turning 30, so I was like, okay, this is potentially a good moment to at least get the domino rolling. No, so yeah, things were coming together, and then I had a very, very meaningful conversation with the N26 founders who ultimately were very supportive, as they think cherish entrepreneurship as well, and we have lots of entrepreneurs that have come out of the N26 school, so to speak. And we made a plan that I still stayed for over a year, ensuring everything is in a good place, succession planning, projects are being finalized, and then made the big step. Yeah, so that was how that happened.
Yeah, I think what it reminds me a lot of is some really wise counsel that I got when I was wrapping up my last role as an MD running a company and about to take actually a similar step to you. In fact, the exact same step as you, which we'll get into, which is, this pursuit of this inner fire that you want to contribute to the world with something of your own. And the counsel that I got was, what are you willing to sacrifice for that which you truly desire?
Yeah.
And it always stuck with me as such a profound piece of advice that I got. And because built in there is this truth, this universal principle that to truly get to where you want to go, you have to know what it's going to cost you and what you're willing to sacrifice. As an athlete, that's maybe time and dedication. As an entrepreneur, it's risk of certainty and comfort for uncertainty. And I think it's a really important principle for people to consider as we're looking at how to navigate modern times is if you want to step out of the template and out of the status quo and chase something that is meaningful to you, whatever that might be, you have to be willing to sacrifice along the way, because it is built in to achieving what you want, that it comes with sacrifice. So you can't have everything. And it's easy in this modern age to think that we can, but some principles don't change. And this idea of sacrifice and reward is one of them, I think, that we share.
It is beautiful. I think that like the way that I have come across this, it's just different words for the same concept, is that, often when we are in our comfort zone, and I'm not saying that being at N26 was in my comfort zone. I was always learning and stretching, but in principle, you have found, let's say, a local maximum, which is not the global maximum of your life, right? And so I think that's sort of where you need to climb down the local maximum, and then you need to go through the valley of despair to then climb the global maximum. That's sort of something that figuratively was very, very much resonated deeply with me, and felt like, you need to, as you said, financial stability, security, a good team, lovely people around you. You need to be willing to climb down from that in order to pursue the global maximum, if you really want to live your truth and if you really want to live your purpose. So yeah.
Wow. Fuego. That was hot. So is it safe to assume then that Elon Musk has reached his global maximum and now he wants to go for intergalactical maximum? Why is he going to Mars?
He sets new standards for everyone. Where his global maximum is, we all don't know, but it's definitely a big one. Yeah.
So what I'd love to talk about next, because it intersects with the story of how we met, is you end that chapter, and instead of diving into starting your own venture, you make this decision to travel, as I understand. Mm-hmm. How did you make that decision to travel on your own? What did you do? And what was the thinking behind taking time to travel before starting your venture?
Yeah, look, I've been very, very fortunate and grateful to meet lots of great people, mentors, people who have been maybe 10 years ahead of me, people that have started meaningful companies. And in many of those stories, you find some of those turning points. You find some of those chapters where people were in between and had the time to deeply think about what's important to them. Of course, again, in modern society, we are often trained to think that, oh, please don't have a gap in your CV. And if you leave one thing, you need to figure out the next one. But the truth of the matter, if you really want to find out on a more deeper level what is important to you, you need to get your mind into a different space than when you're still very much in the problem solving mode of a full-time executive responsibility. So I met very impressive founders who I heard their stories where they said, okay, I sold this company I wasn't really happy with, and then I decided to take a full year making the commitment to myself not to decide what I will do until at least 12 months from now, to truly allow myself to get into a different frame of thinking and so on. So for me, I knew very clearly since I was in Sydney in 2013, I will be an entrepreneur. I will be an entrepreneur that is going to attempt to solve a meaningful global challenge that we face in the 21st century. But I wasn't entirely sure what is that going to be, right? And so for me, the clarity on I will be a founder and I will attempt to solve something meaningful to this is the topic that is deeply connected to me. This is sort of the professional purpose of my life. That's a journey, right? And so I felt that first giving me permission, not needing to make a decision like that within at least 12 or even 18 months after leaving N26 was one big component. And another one was putting myself in environments, in very different environments, right? So I think also that's been something on my mind for a few years. How do I put myself into environments that I have no clue about? How do I put myself in environments where also how do I embark on a time where there is no objective? I didn't go on the trip to find my idea. I sort of said, well, maybe it happens as a side effect, but if I don't, the trip didn't fail. The trip is really about understanding people, cultures, connecting with nature in different parts of the world, and revisiting some old assumptions about me, and meeting great people like you. So lots of insights there, lots of things that have shaped my decision to go and do that. But I look back on it now with the deepest gratitude. It was one of the most meaningful times of my life, and has also, as I had anticipated, shown me very much the way on what I want to do next. But it wasn't forced. It wasn't sitting in a whiteboard in a room on a whiteboard and mapping problem spaces and market opportunities, but it was very much also listening to your intuition, meeting people, and I believe there are always one or two bigger lessons that such a trip has in store for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a profound. I mean, I love that even when you talk about travel, you talk about it with such intentionality, and that is, I think, something that is a big lesson in the modern world. Is we only have so much attention and so much time and so many resources. How intentional we are with those has a massive bearing on the outcomes and the trajectory of our lives. Absolutely. Something that we've often discussed is this idea that your day is a little version of your life. And it's something that I remember us talking about when we were on the trip. And it's easy to let one day pass, but when you see a day being a little version of your life, you treat it so differently.
Yeah.
You treat each hour with a different level of respect. You treat each engagement with a different level of importance. You treat each opportunity with a different feeling of rarity. And so I really love that. And I'm wondering if you can't share with everyone a couple of your big aha moments or your big conclusions from your travel. And tell us where you traveled as well.
Yeah. Oof, great ones. I think we've been building up also to the moment where we met. So I feel you need to tell that story shortly. But
I will.
Where to start? So where did I travel? I mean, I really traveled once around the world. So starting in Berlin, I always was traveling west. So started in South America, from the north of Brazil to the south of Patagonia, 4 months there, and then continued from Chile over to New Zealand, went on to Australia, went on to Southeast Asia, and ultimately to Japan for the second 4 months. So ultimately almost 8 months on the road, and then from Japan back to Berlin. So that was unique and truly exceptional, because so many different cultures, so many different insights. I don't know, like one consistent takeaway, and I think also in the context of making sense of modern times, I think when we follow the news now and so on, we can it's easy to lose hope somehow, in the good of humanity. But what I found on the micro level, every encounter few exceptions always confirming the rule, but with a few, like most encounters in 8 months of traveling by myself, like people are good, you know, people genuinely, if you don't want harm for them, they don't want harm for you. People want to be helpful. People want you to experience their country, their culture with pride, and you know, so from capoeira in the north of Brazil to you know, people in a boxing camp in Thailand to people in the south of Japan, communicating with hands and feet if necessary. Like people genuinely were helpful, and those are just the locals, you know. Then people you meet on the trip, again, link to you telling the story now where we met.
Yeah,
genuinely amazing. So I've walked away with a lot of sort of genuine, how do you say, faith in humanity is maybe a very dramatic way of putting it, but this genuine, if you know, approach life with positivity, optimism, kindness, compassion for others, then that will be reciprocated. And I think that seeing and experiencing that in all parts of the world was tremendously empowering. Yeah,
that's incredibly inspiring. And I think if it's a sum total of a reason to travel, if you can get to that learning, but feel that learning, you know, not just observe it, actually feel it and believe it, then it's an incredible thing. So
yeah, Fahim, why were you traveling and where have you
why
been?
was I traveling? So, I mean, similar to you, Alex, I was at the end of a certain maximum, a local maximum. For me, it felt like it was the end of the local maximum in advertising, which is what my journey was for the 12 years prior. And I just knew that I wanted to build something of my own.
Yeah.
My wife, Asma, had been through a life experience, which showed us a very intimate experience of a problem in the world. And as time grew, the resonance of that problem and wanting to do something about that problem just grew and grew with us. But interestingly, I got to the same conclusion as you, which was before we're ready to solve that problem and to dive into it, we need to get space. And the reason for that is I believe in the power of both deep participation as well as far observation. And in life, sometimes you need to step back to observe and not participate. And at other times, you have to just be participating and not thinking too much.
Yeah.
So it was in that, I was in a phase of life where I'd been doing lots of participating consistently for over a decade, every single day of my life. And I knew that there were profound lessons, but they were in my periphery. And I wouldn't get to experience them unless I joined them in the periphery. So travel was the answer. For me, South America always called me. It was a place that I knew I had to go to at some stage of my life. Before I got married, I'd always say to my parents, if I go to Brazil, I'm not going to come back. So I'm not going to go. And it's the reason why I didn't go. I just knew I wouldn't come back if I was there on my own. So thankfully, I went with a partner who dragged me back to civilization, and by that I mean working civilization. So enter Peru. We go to Peru. One of the things I knew I wanted to do was hike to Machu Picchu, to experience that place, that, you know, one of the wonders of the world, but through walking there, because it would feel like a pilgrimage of sorts. I wanted to feel nature. I wanted to connect with the mountains, or apus as they call them there. And that was what we decided to do. And so everyone listening, what happened was we found a company that would help you, you know, do the hike and organize everything. And we go and sit in the orientation room, which is 2 days before. And myself and Asma, we enter this room of about 18 very rowdy and hormonally charged Australian young men. And there's one other lonely soul in that room, who's the man on this call with me. And thankfully, the tour organizers told the three of us to join another room, and actually we'd be joining a different group of people. And so we enter this room, and there was 8 wonderful people who ended up becoming great friends. And so how Alex and I met is we hiked the Andes Mountains together into Salcantay. The funny thing is, in that room, we had no idea about what we do. It's one of the beautiful things about travel. There's no status associated with it. There's no jobs. There's no descriptions. There's just seekers and travelers on this journey. And all we knew is the thing we had in common was climbing this mountain. So essentially, from the moment we were picked up to start the hike on day one, Asma and I sat in the back of the bus, and this guy turns around and he says, "Hi, I'm Alex." And we got chatting, and within half an hour had discovered in the mountains of Peru that this guy from Austria and this couple from South Africa have all ended their jobs and are all traveling before starting a business in health tech, and that we had this common passion about healthcare. And so that's how we met. And so instantly we connected. And so the 5-day journey of getting to know each other started. So in many ways, I feel like our meeting was going to happen regardless, because the sheer serendipity of it is so outrageous that I'm sure it'll make our books one day. I'm sure you will write a book one day. And so I want to go into that a little bit, because I think that the travel we've covered and it's profound. Let's talk about health. As you were thinking about what kind of business you wanted to build, and you knew what was going to be an important part of what the world needs solving, what personal experience led you to health? Why did health matter to you so much, besides you being an athlete and being very fit? Why is health the thing that maybe interested you?
Yeah. I mean, what a great summary. I got goosebumps when you were talking about our meeting together, and yeah, this profound serendipity that needed to happen to bring us together. And that serendipity continued later on in our friendship as we overlapped in London last year, also for a few months, and so on. Many more stories to be told. But to go into what you said, so I think at the time that we met, my certainty around, actually, sorry, let me take one step back. So when I left N26, I was already for a few years, thinking about the area in which I want to have this impact with my venture is going to be in one of 3 areas that I sort of had an intuition around. It could have been within climate and sustainability, because I think if we think about what are challenges we face in the 21st century, you would be incomplete if you didn't consider the planet and sort of sustainability. So that was one. Another one I feel very strongly about was education, just also reflecting on where did I learn what I needed to learn in order to do my journey that was not in traditional education, right? So that was something I also felt maybe I have quite a unique insight or something that could be important. And third, very importantly, also health. As you said, many things connected me there, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. But I think important just to contextualize also what I talked about before, this truth-seeking journey. How do you figure out what you truly want to do? The starting point for me after leaving N26 was, okay, in one of these 3 areas, I feel I'll end up. Okay, and then I go on this journey. And what is important from the travel as well is, as I said, I think each of these trips can have 1 or 2 bigger lessons in store for you if your eyes, your heart, and your ears and everything is open. And so meeting you actually was an important additional clue in that regard. No, like, so why would we spend 5.5 days together where you left a wonderful job, got married, and then went traveling to then start a health company of all kind of companies, right? So while I was already gravitating towards that when we met, I think our meeting and several other also events over the next months of my travel really gave me even more clarity and certainty that is the clue. And so I think, yeah, for those wondering, well, how do you actually make sense of some of these big lessons that are available for you on such a trip? It is also really about paying attention to what kind of people, what kind of conversations, cross your path. Why? How does it feel for you when someone tells you their story about a health company and so on? So yeah, I just felt really compelled to also share how meeting you was profound in that regard. To now answer your question sort of on why health and why that matters to me so much, I think you touched on one of the 3 sort of big pillars that were dots that I could retrospectively connect with that distance and space that I had during my travels, was of course 10 years being an athlete, right? So that is something where I was very in tune on my body, my physical health, also as I mentioned, the mental side. When you prepare for a competition, like how do you stay on the top of your game? How do you not get sick consistently, that you don't miss training? It was one of the big Achilles heels. I remember one year I did get sick a couple of weeks before the nationals, and your season's over essentially, right? Because you had a cold for a week. And so deeply being aware, how do I stay consistently healthy for, in that case, over 10 years to consistently improve, was a huge theme that just was a part of my early life. I think the other part is much more zooming very much to the other end of life, so to speak, now, and is observing also how people age around me, and observing even close family members not really maybe aging that well, reflecting on physical functioning that you have later in life. What sort of confidence did that give me as someone who was an athlete, very interested in my functioning, but also as someone at N26, I consider that was like a mental athlete, emotional athlete, something where over 10 years again, how do you consistently show up, how do you consistently grow and improve in order to have impact with the people you're working on. So for me, this idea of working on hard goals over long periods of time and consistently showing up as the best version of yourself, that for me is the definition of health. And then wanting to do that over as long of a time period as possible is sort of was very natural for me to connect and say, okay, well, I would actually like to, when I'm 50, when I'm 60, still be able to pursue hard 10-year goals. And that maybe those were two very important dots I connected. And the third one was a close friend of mine in Vienna, who was a very sports scientist and doctor, very much 5 years ago started talking to me about the idea of that we can really influence our physical and mental abilities also in the long term, based on what we do today, based on how we think about it, and this very long-term approach to thinking about health, and again, health defined as being at your full capabilities, not health defined as the absence of sickness, which today very much is the definition of the healthcare system. Just has led me on to this mission to see, okay, well, there is definitely some huge value there. That is something that is very much worth fighting for. How do we keep people healthy? How do we bring them at optimal health? How do we, allow them to stay healthy over a longer life period? Is just something that I just found that's my topic, and I want to go into that space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, when I kind of think about the healthcare system and the way the entire thing is kind of set up, there is no reward within the whole value chain of better patient outcomes. So people being healthier is not actually in anyone's interest. It's not in the interests of clinicians whose jobs are to have lots of appointments and charge per appointment. It's not in the benefit of pharmaceutical companies that are producing products to help people that are not well. There is no kind of meaningful incentive to people being healthier. And I think that's one of the big challenges that different people building in the health space have, is how do we realign the system so that true health, as the way you've defined it, which I agree with, is actually the thing that is incentivized and therefore behavior aligns to, etc. And my feeling is that that's got to come from the ground up. It's got to come from people themselves. Making choices. It's got to come from entrepreneurship, because businesses have always been the great disruptor of systems and the way things are, and are always able to land a new way of doing things. I just take, for example, I don't know, glucose monitoring or something like that. A company like Zoe Nutrition has really thrown this into kind of the mainstay, certainly in the UK. And I think that's really interesting. So maybe if we start to bridge health with technology and entrepreneurship, do you maybe want to share a little bit with us about what you're thinking within the healthcare world?
Well, honestly, still super early at this stage. So I think what was always my big conviction was to start with a clear purpose, right? So it's very easy for people to think that if you start a startup, you need to come up with the idea, the big idea, the solution, the you just thought about the iPhone, and that's what it means to be an entrepreneur. And I think my strong conviction, and so far I feel very much on the right track in that regard, is start with something that you deeply care about. Start with something maybe even that you as a founder have had bad experiences with as a consumer. And I can attest, when I met my friend that I referenced before over the last 5 years, and he asked me to take certain tests for longer term, diagnostics and understanding my risk profile in the very long term, how I was treated and rejected by the current healthcare system left a mark. So then you say, okay, I, as a founder, I've experienced this problem. No one cares about my long-term health. The system is not set up for that. Okay, maybe there is something worth addressing. So for me at this point, it's very much, okay, I found sort of the purpose, the mission, the problem statement. I deeply care about it. I've experienced sort of how today's system works, and it's not set out to deliver on the outcomes that I wish for everyone, including myself. And then take it from there, right? So I think that's where, then you need to reflect on, is this true for other people? Is this only my own problem? And that's again where then my reflections on the travel come in, where you meet so many people from all around the world. And I remember deeply, the day I arrived in Japan, the last country of my journey, I went to a temple in Tokyo. I can't remember the exact name, but there was this ceremony where people wrote on a wooden card, what is their number one wish in life, essentially, and you could see what people had written there. And it was fascinating to see, in different languages that I could read, German, Spanish, English, people really, really, really wishing for essentially health for themselves,
Wow.
health of their loved ones, happiness, but this recurring theme was so profound. And I think, people generally are seeking to live healthy lives and don't really know where to turn to start that. So this is something where I'm now very excited to move much more deeply in. Yeah.
Amazing. Something I want to talk to you about is actually starting a business and startup life, because it's something you have deep experience in, and that you've already been on a rocket journey, and now you're looking to replicate that rocket journey, albeit your own. I, for example, am doing it for the first time, although I've run a business of scale and have gone through different, phases with that. A technology startup is its own little species of thing, and there are lots of things to consider for people. And often people ask me about tips, or how do you know when you're ready to start a business, or where do you even start? So I wanted to talk to you about a few of the foundational things when it comes to starting a business and in health tech, in technology in particular.
Yeah.
The first is, you've got the problem, you've got the mission, you've got the thing you want to solve. That's great. Aligned. Let's do this thing. What do you do next? What do you need? Do you need people?
Yeah, so I think the central thing, if you want to build a customer first business, which I think is, well, from my perspective, the only true way to go here, is first cause of action needs to be to deeply understand who is your target customer, what are their problems, what are their needs and wants, and so I think the first phase of going from a purpose problem statement to potentially sort of a initial product proposition is to spend over proportional amount of time in research, like until you have user interviews where you basically already know what they're going to say when you ask a question. Like, you need to deeply understand how they think about, in this case now, let's say their personal health, their challenges, why does it matter to them, what are their priorities, what have been experiences with traditional healthcare today, where's the friction coming from, right? So I think super important to start with just also getting into the phase of talking to potential customers, right? So you need to have maybe a thesis on who your target customer is and why, but once you have that, you can validate that, you can start user research. I
would agree with that, and maybe just to share how we've gone about that. So we're focusing on people with autoimmune conditions because of Asma's journey of being diagnosed with one and self-managing it essentially because of the system similar to you that doesn't really help you with that.
Yeah.
And our starting point was firstly to articulate her experience and then to see if that experience and that problem or that problem experience was isolated or was it replicated. And what's amazing about the world now is because of social media, because of the internet, you can reach out and speak to people. And so a lot of what we did in the beginning part of our journey is we started a social media account, and the purpose of that was to try and create a community of people who shared that condition and who shared that journey. Because what I find is there is so much collective wisdom that exists on people's health journeys, but it has never been captured and learned from. And that collective wisdom holds the key for so many people who are newly diagnosed, recently diagnosed, or are going through something.
Yeah.
So what we found, and it's, I suppose, a tip for people, that if you're looking to understand a market in whatever industry you're going into, put yourself out there, go onto social media, send people messages, go, hey, I feel like you've got a similar journey to what I'm going through. Do you want to talk about it? What I've been amazed at over the last year is how willing people are to share their experiences with you and their learning and their lessons with you. Whether it's someone who shares the problem you're solving or someone in business who's significantly more experienced than you, who's willing to give you a couple of their tough lessons so that you don't repeat them. So people, it actually links really beautifully with your travel lesson, which is people are inherently good and people are inherently willing to share, but you have to come to the table and be willing to ask. Yeah. So that's just something that we experienced, was when you ask people, they help. And similarly, you need to be willing to give others without expectation. It's kind of this generosity loop. That's almost the unsaid part of startup life, which is help and you'll get helped.
Yeah.
And you've been very instrumental in teaching us that through sharing your wisdom with us. So once you've done your research, and now you can predict what people are going to say, kind of, sort of, sometimes, what do you do now? What's important to do next? When can I start building a product and giving it to people?
Yeah. I mean, my philosophy there is that you need to really also continue to optimize for learning. So learning is the currency of building businesses in 2025. Things are changing so fast. You have very many, people going into entrepreneurship. So I think okay, let's build now a product for a year and then let's see what happens. I think that doesn't really work anymore. So you need to, once you deeply understand the problems, right? So you have problem discovery, customer discovery, maybe then you have developed certain thesis on what a solution could look like. And then you also there do a bit more of solution discovery, where you maybe, provoke, in certain interviews, you just prepare a draft proposition of something that you think about that could resonate, and make sure that it has some sharp edges, right? That you actually say, here we are promoting something that's unheard of, but that teases out and provokes, one aspect of your potential proposition in a way that creates a strong response, to then work back from that and say, okay, well, based on that, you learn again more about the needs and wants of your customers. And once you're at the end of that phase, I think it is important to draft. People don't buy a product; they buy a promise. And so, if you are able to articulate very clearly what is your promise, what job in these people's lives are you going to help solve, and how, you go and you ideally sell that to customers before you build that product, right? So that you have tangible commitments from potential customers. That could be in a B2B context, letters of intent. That could be in a B2C context, at least maybe a small, as simple as leaving email addresses on a waiting list, even though that commitment is not as strong. But saying, when you talk to customers, potential customers, you charge them and you say, hey, in 2 months from now, I'll deliver you this that costs this. Are you willing to pay 50% up front? So really to see when does the rubber hit the road, because you have a customer, once they actually also pay money, it's always easy to say, yeah, I think this is great and I'll happily use it. But trying to get this sort of, what is being referred to as demo, sell, build mindset, where you sort of first demo a proposition that is a promise, that is sort of a draft where, you know, the product doesn't exist yet. You sell that promise, people, you know, you see what really resonates, and then you go and build it, as opposed to you go into somewhere into the basement, you build something for a year that then no one's interested. Yeah. And this sort of very quickly iterating cycle is something that's very important, and then that I think is the new mindset that we need when building businesses.
I love that. I think it's also, it just shows how different new business is from old business. You know, there's so much about old business that's about come up with a product and then find a way to sell it. Whereas what we're talking about is actually building products based on deep need and insight, and being flexible enough to change that, which is what technology gives you. You know, you can't do that if you've set up a car manufacturing warehouse with a certain assembly line and certain parts that you've bought and etc. So it's one of the beauties of technology businesses as they evolve and they develop. I mean, just yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg made big announcements around the future of Facebook, Instagram, and how those communities are actually going to evolve in modern times. I might actually do a separate piece on that because I think it's got a big ramification for speech and who can say what and where and how.
Yeah.
But maybe if we just stick on this theme, so let's fast forward a few years and you get some of the basics right. Now you've got maybe 10 to 20 people or something like that.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have to start to think about things like company culture. What do you think about company culture? Does it matter? Is it one of these soft things that these new age yuppies are talking about? Does it drive performance? How do you think about it?
I think if you start thinking about it a few years after you start, when you already have 20 people, you're definitely very late to the game. If there's one thing I've learned from, you know, deeply studying some of the most successful founders of our time, you know, when you, I don't know, podcasts with Brian Chesky or other people, where when the question is asked, what's one thing you would do differently? I think without exception, people say, I would be way more intentional about the culture from the beginning. And so I think, what is culture? I mean, also to demystify, I think it is a very, very simply speaking, it is how the group behaves, right? Very simply, it's behavioral. It is determined by who's part of the group, and it is determined by what behaviors you tolerate. And by tolerating them, you encourage them. And so importantly, culture therefore is not static, it's always moving, no? Because it's the sum of all behaviors every day by every team member. And so as founders, you have a choice to make, because you know, the what you tolerate, I think that's so important. It's not only the things that you emphasize, that you think are good behaviors, it's the one where you also not intervene, that is seen as, oh, that's how we do things here. It's accepted here to, you know, show up to every meeting 10 minutes late. No one really cares about that. And by accepting that, it becomes encouraged, and soon you will find yourself, you know, where every meeting starts 10 minutes later. So just as a small example. And you know, I think you can think about it as also the seeds you plant in your garden, and you know, are you weeding out the weeds, and what does your garden look like 2-3 years from now? No? So if, to your point, which obviously was only a provocation, you say you start thinking about it 3 years later, it's like the first time you start taking out the weeds is when they all already are small trees, right? And so for me, having had now 10 years of experience in working with teams and in companies, that is one big learning where I want to cut the learning curve and also learn from some of the greats of our time, and be very intentional from the very early days, right? So, you know, when you even just you as co-founders are together, even when you're searching for co-founders, yeah. So this is sort of another entire thing we could probably speak separately about, but recognizing we're reaching the end of our time today. Even when finding co-founders, knowing what are those cultural principles, values that you find important in building a company, and making that part of, do these co-founders fit to me also from a cultural perspective, and then as a result, what are the values, norms, behaviors that we want to bring into the company. So I will definitely think about this. Well, I am already thinking about this, yeah, but definitely earlier than when you're 10, 20 people, because very hard to then make a change afterwards.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's something that I both experienced in my previous role, as well as you know, share with you the importance of being super intentional about that, and not taking for granted the example that's set by the founders themselves, and what permissions that gives people, and what inspiration or lack thereof it gives people. So maybe to wrap us up, I think we could have conversations for hours, and for everyone listening, Alex and I do have conversations.
Which we do,
for hours,
exactly.
yeah. And we're going to continue to do that this weekend when we see each other in London. But what I wanted to end on is, there might be someone listening to our conversation and saying, wow, that's all well and good. Lucky guys, got to travel, got to spend time thinking, and now they're starting their businesses. And maybe that person is in a job and they're going, should I start a business or not? What piece of advice would you give that person, that one person who's thinking about, should I start a business or not? Make the case for startups.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Very, very good question. I mean, I almost see it as a two-step process, or sort of depending on the situation now of this listener is someone already very clear that they want to be an entrepreneur because they've deeply thought about it, and you know, that would be the case for me, you know, where sort of 2013 I decided that's my path for good reasons. Then I was at N26 and was like, okay, now when is the time? It's not if, it's when. And so when you're in that position, I think it's two ways. Either, as you said, you know, you have the opportunities to take that time off, which, as you correctly point out, of course, is also a privilege, you know, to maybe have saved money for 10 years that allow you to take a year off and experience what I've experienced. Yeah, so I obviously say that with a lot of humility, that's maybe not something available to everyone, but if the question is more if and not when, no, I think, sorry, if it's more when and not if, then I think be mindful of when do you see the learning curve cutting, or when maybe you have that intuition and that insight of, oh, you know, here is the thing I stumbled over. That's the clear calling. You know, very often you hear stories of the really successful businesses, they start as a side hustle. So someone discovers something, they find a problem, and they, I don't know, start working a bit on it on the weekend, and suddenly it takes off, and they talk to people, and over time, then they do that transition without a big, you know, 1 year in between, and so on. So that is very common. That is very possible. I think if you're at the place where you're unsure yet if you want to be an entrepreneur at all, I think that's where I find this bit deeper reflection time on what matters to you. What's your, also, you know, very frankly, you know, what is your comfort with uncertainty? What is your comfort with risk? How do you deal with responsibility always being on, you know, like even as a founder, while you can be off sometimes, when shit hits the fan, you will get the call and you're ultimately accountable. So I think there's certain things in introspection that are important for you to think about. But net, I think everyone starting a business is very welcome. We need a generation of entrepreneurs to tackle the big problems ahead of us. And if you have the itch that you want to contribute, I think almost every skill that you need as an entrepreneur is learnable. And so as long as you're a huge learner and someone who deeply believes in the power of growth mindset, I think you can become a very successful entrepreneur and do something very meaningful in the world. So yeah, I think that's my...
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Thank you, Alex. I think for me, ultimately, entrepreneurs are problem solvers. They pick a problem and they gather people, resources, time and effort to solve that thing. Yeah. And when I look at modern times and I look at the world we're in, I think it is such a time of polarity. We've got, you know, opportunities like we've never had before, and technology and connection and globalization like we've never had it before. But we also have challenges like we've never had before. It was never going to always be upside without the downside. The universal law of balance, karma, yin and yang, whatever you want to call it, means that huge upside came with huge downsides. And so what that's going to require is entrepreneurs picking some of those downsides to solve. And that's how I see us moving forward into kind of a more, you know, a beautiful future, is when the downsides created by the upsides that we've had are picked by entrepreneurs and are solved, so that some of those downsides get covered up and we can move forward. And so to anyone listening, picking a problem to build, I salute you. To Alex, thank you very much for the journey, the friendship, the conversation, for choosing to build a business in a powerful space. I've no doubt we'll have continued conversations on this as we evolve. And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thanks so much. Cheers, everyone.